The clams were swimming in butter as he scooped a healthy handful out onto his plate and bit into them, his wet manhood gleaming off the black of his boiled leather. The grease rolled down his beard with a sickening crunch and... geez, who writes shit like this? It's pretty awful, really, isn't it? Isn't it? George seems to have some odd penchant for describing food in great detail to the point it's one of the most mocked elements of the entire series. And you know what? It's not as bad as you think. So, whether you like it or you hate it, chances are you've happened upon a forum post or comment or video or whatever that has drawn joking criticism against George R.R. Martin and his signature compilation of headcanon on Middle Ages history, A Song of Ice and Fire, or perhaps the companion TV show. One of the first and perhaps the most fun poked at when it comes to this series is Martin and his seemingly sexual fucking obsession with describing in detail all the food the characters eat. For Georgie, it's not simply enough to say the characters ate some food. No, they eat crabs swimming in butter with peasy grease running down every bearded chin and onto every breast coat of dark boiled leather in the land. So what the fuck gives? Is Martin just a retard? Why does he go into such depths about the goddamn food? Why does it matter? Well, I'm here to insist that all this food nonsense actually has an immensely huge purpose in the overall plot. Not only that, but it does a great job at illustrating one of the series' finer overall themes, and really makes that theme, that is, anti-war, much stronger. How the fuck am I gonna convince you of that, you ask? Well, sit down and loosen out. It's time to go for a ride. Let's start by quickly covering over one of the major themes of Song of Ice and Fire, again, that being anti-war. The anti-war messages are, for the most part, pretty fucking obvious. It doesn't take a deep analyzation to pick up on a lot of them. But there are two that get kind of pushed to the wayside and not a lot of people seem to pick up on, which I'm certain was Martin's intent, and it makes the anti-war message not only a lot stronger, but a lot more personal and self-reflective to the reader. See, if you've ever left your fucking house since the year 2002, there's no way you haven't seen some sweaty cunt in a Naruto t-shirt say the words, "Winter is coming." It is plastered all the fuck over every piece of Game of Thrones promotional art, as if you'd be led to believe that the Illuminati that controls our media is starting to think that the masses need to be reminded of the seasons or something. And through our long convoluted tale, we keep hearing, winter is coming, winter is coming. Winter is gonna fuck shit up. We also keep hearing something else. We're told repeatedly that even though the summer and spring have been long, the harvests haven't been especially good throughout the land. Why? Because like the last 10 years or so have been riddled with war after war. Now there's more wars going on. And who suffers the most in war? Everyone gets all teary-eyed and sad when people like Ned Stark die, or Robb Stark dies, or Catelyn Stark dies, or some people who aren't the Starks die. And they have good reasons. We're given a lot of purpose in caring for these characters. We want them to succeed or whatever, not get the axe. But you want to know which characters no one ever gives a damn about? The small folk. The thousands of peasants, peons, and villagers that get fucking butchered and starved because of these wars. They have it worse than anyone. Robert Baratheon rises an army to depose an insane king who is committing massive crimes by burning people alive and stuff. You know, righteous as it is, but what about the countless small people who were killed in that war? Joffrey lops Ned Stark's head off and Robb starts a war over it. Fair enough, you sympathize greatly with Robb and you want to see Joffrey pay his dues for being a little tit shit. But think about it. They began a war when one of the longest winters in recent history is about to descend upon the land, give or take 5 books or so, when the land already doesn't even have enough food to really weather that winter, and now you're expending a ton of vital supplies on this war and thousands of small folk on either side are dying, crops are being burned, and in general no one is acting like fucking winter is coming? Robb has good reason to want to go to war against the Lannisters, and George does make this clear. He gives the reader a good and justifiable reason to support the war and its righteous cause. But Robb had an even better fucking reason not to go to war. If you were to ask me, I think Martin is, all in all, kind of a crappy writer. He's very amateur in descriptions, he makes amateur mistakes like falling into using the same descriptions or turns of phrases countless times. Like, damn, count how many times he uses a description such as in a tone that brooked no argument or with a sickening crunch. He'll use a description once and then accidentally begin using it again and again for hundreds of pages before he catches what he did and starts mixing it up a bit more until the next time he fucks up. But for as amateur as his prose can be, he does an excellent job at conveying the true cost and true effects of war. Because it's always the little people that suffer the most, the people who don't really give a shit about the war or its cause, who just want to live their little lives without getting fucking bloody molested by any roving group of soldiers that come their way. There's several specific times in the story we see people suffer because of a forced allegiance to one side or the other. Remember those girls that Jaime and Brienne and now you know who Cleos is, found? They were hung by Starkmen because they serviced Lannistermen. Like, what fucking choice did the girls have? They either serviced the Lannisters or died to them, but in servicing them, they were killed by the Starks. What the fuck? At Harrenhal, once Tywin Lannister takes over, he has several of the workers hung because they were working for the Lannisters. But they had no choice. Again, it was work for the Lannisters or die. And when the Northmen came, they died to the Northmen for helping the Lannisters. In war, soldiers die and good guys die, and that's all really very tragic and serious, and Martin knows this. But the biggest sufferers are, again, the little people, and they're often the ones that no one really gives a shit about. When you read Song of Ice and when you watch Game of Thrones, you don't give a shit about all the small folks that are dying. They're not Ned Stark, who cares? That's the biggest purpose of the story, really. So, back to the feasting. Now that we know the true horror of war, let's talk about all the goddamn food the characters eat, because I assure you, Martin doesn't detail it so much because he has a weird sexual fetish for food. Trust me. Over the course of the story, as I've said, we keep hearing about how shitty the recent harvests have been in most of the realm. The North has had bad crops, King's Landing is starving, the Riverlands have had most of their crops burned, and what do our main characters do? They feast. They feast at the drop of a fucking hat. We won a battle? Feast. We have a couple of lords meeting? Feast. King is coming to visit? Feast. Wedding? Feast. Tournament? Feast. Birthday? Feast. We got Charles Dance to play Tywin Lannister? Oh, you better believe it. Feast. Both sides, the Stark and the Lannister, the good and the bad, share equal amounts of face stuffing. So what does this have to do with Martin's overly specific description of the food? Well, think back to the time you read through the novels, which you didn't do. The first couple of books describe feasts with lots of meat and lots of butter. This is where the classic swimming in butter line can be heard the most. They eat feasts heavy in meats, vegetables like peas, and lots of hyper-commodity seafoods like clams. But by the third book and beyond, though, our feasts start to take on different descriptions. Most notably, the Red Wedding Feast, for example, was pretty shitty. They ate mashed up turnips, a crappy stew, and the only meat they had was lamb. Because they've fucking eaten everything else. The realm is on the verge of being foodless, and winter is a cunt hair away. Conversely, while all these assholes in their castles suck down food and fuck each other in peace, we constantly hear how shitty people like Jon Snow eat when their asses are way out in the middle of the fucking snow boonies on the other side of a big ass ice wall, defending the realm from wildlings and ice motherfuckers and shit. That's another thing. The White Walkers. They're an obvious physical representation of the coming winter. Their purpose in this story is to remind the reader there's a very serious threat looming over the entire realm, and that warring like the realm is fucking retarded. The Night's Watch, i.e. the poor fucks that are trying to remind the rest of the realm that winter is coming, get more or less ignored. Because the people of the South don't want to worry about that. Fuck winter. We have it good, right? The main bad guy of the entire story truly is winter. The White Walkers are just kind of there to be a more exciting metaphor of winter. This is also, I truly think, why the world of Ice and Fire works the way it does, with the years-long seasons and everything. Winter is the final bad guy, and Martin wanted to give himself a lot of time for the story to build up to that winter. If the seasons worked the way they do on planet Earth, the story would only have like 4 or 6 months to happen before winter came. So, Martin made the world work differently so that his plot had enough time to play out before winter came and fucked everything up. Ultimately, the right choice that Robb should have made was to forgive Ned's murder. One man, one good man might have died, and one evil, shitty king might have ruled for a time, but would that not have been better than starting a war that terrorized thousands of people and ensured they'd starve when winter came? And it's here that Martin's message is not only very true, but very strong. His message is unlike other anti-war messages where war and the reasons for going to it are always conveyed as completely wrong and terrible. In Song of Ice and Fire, he gives good and legitimate reasons to support war, and he conveys that war usually does start over good, if not hyper-personal, reasons. But he also expresses that there's terrible costs associated with war, even when it's against an enemy that deserves to be defeated. If it were all true and just, Joffrey would have paid for his crime and been deposed as king. But it's not that easy, and ultimately, it's not worth it. George might be kind of a dopey writer. He might come up with some really lame ideas, he might subconsciously reuse the same descriptions and turns of phrases over and over, and his erotic writing might be on the level of cringe-inducing sex fic. But he has done a marvelous job at constructing his series' main themes, and it's a testament to how well he's done it that not many of his readers truly catch on to it. So, the next time you're reading, yeah right, Song of Ice and Fire, and you get to a paragraph-long description of clams swimming in butter with extra peas, just remember, George might think that boiled leather is the only thing in existence, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have a very good point behind it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go swim in some butter.